All right, so here's the question that I posed before the break. Is what we think is going to be a strength, or maybe the biggest strength for Ole Miss offensively, going to affect the decision of who the starting quarterback is? So what do I mean? Ole Miss is going to be pretty good on the offensive line. They're going to be pretty good on the offensive line. Got some guys coming back, some experience there. They've moved some people around. They believe that is a strength. There is a very quiet optimism that the running back room may have gotten better. Jerrion Ely is in camp with the Chiefs. Snoop Conner is in camp with the Jaguars. And so it's a running back room that looks a whole lot different. Those guys were incredibly productive, right? I mean, you had home run ability with Jerrion Ely. You had undervalued ability with Snoop Conner, not to mention his ability to get it into the end zone from inside the 5-yard line. He was tough in those situations, but probably was better in the open field than he ever got credit for. Those guys are gone. You've still got Kentrell Bullock from that room from a year ago, but you've added Zach Evans and you've added Ulysses Bennett. Nobody wants to say out loud, this running back group is going to be better than the previous running back group. But there's some people that are thinking that without saying it out loud. Obviously, you've got to see it happen. So, point being in all of that, if indeed offensive line and running game is a strength, and maybe the biggest strength for Ole Miss offensively, does that factor into the decision of which quarterback you go with as a starter? If Luke Altmaier is good to really good and does a better job protecting the football and managing the game, and I don't mean managing the game manager bad label, and you've got a running game that you can lean on and maybe some play action pass stuff that you can lean on, does that make Luke Altmaier perhaps a safer choice than Jackson Dart, who has a bigger arm, has the reputation for being more of a gunslinger, although it's a really small sample size, right? He was just a freshman last year. Do you become more likely to choose what you feel like is a little bit safer option in terms of protecting the football and not turning it over based on the fact that you think you're going to be able to run the ball and kind of control the game? Does that make sense?
It does. It's a fascinating question, honestly. I've thought about this a lot, and I think what I would do and what Lane would do are two different things. As we've learned in the 2 years he's been the coach at Ole Miss, what he cares about with how they coach games is maximizing their chances to win, even if it also increases their chances to lose. We saw it in the Alabama game. So many people, I remember texted into our show, why didn't they just punt there? Alabama scored again. Well, because he was trying to maximize his team's chance at winning. He didn't care what the point spread was. He cared about trying to win. And so when it comes...
That's the reason they went for it on fourth down inside the 10 instead of putting points on the board on the first drive of the game.
Because that maximized their chance at winning that game. It wasn't about playing close. It was about trying to win. So using that mentality with quarterbacks. Now, if Jackson Dart turns it over in a way that people described he did in the spring, he's not going to win the job. But if he reduces that sum and is still the riskier guy with the higher ceiling, that's who they're going to go with. Because he's coached by a guy that wants to maximize the ceiling of his team, even at the risk of lowering the floor. He coaches that way, at least from our vantage point. So if Dart can reduce the turnover some, he doesn't have to be perfect. If he can cut them down some, he's going to be your guy, because when Alabama comes to town, he wants to win that game. And conservative isn't winning that game.
The thing for me that stands out in this is it's not like there's this huge gap between these two guys, right? Altmaier's a good quarterback.
He's a
really. He showed you a little. He's talented. I saw him in high school, obviously here in Starkville. I saw a little bit of him last season. I think he's got the confidence and the ability to run this offense. So it's not like a situation where you're like, well, if Altmaier comes in, we're 6-6, 7-5 at best, but with Dart we could be 11-1. It's nothing like that, and that's what leads me to believe. I think it'll be Altmaier if that's the case. What Borky described, I think it's. Look, both of these guys can move the chains. Both of these guys can get the ball in the end zone. Maybe one does it a little bit more, but the other guy, he also gives away the ball more. Lane Kiffin's not going to sit there and tolerate a bunch of turnovers. He sort of had to do it with Corral because the other option at that time was Plumlee, who couldn't throw the football. So he had to go through Corral's junior year or Corral's second year, whatever it was. I don't know the eligibility. But last year, he had a quarterback who didn't turn the ball over as much. And he's going to want to keep it that way because you've got the weapons around him to be explosive regardless. I don't think Kiffin will take chances on a guy he doesn't fully trust to not turn the ball over.
Yeah. Does Lane Kiffin coach that position differently this year than maybe he did with Matt Corral? Because
I would think
the experience level is lower.
It has to be, right? You're still teaching. Yeah, there's more teaching this year than there was last year.
On the Luke Altmaier in the Sugar Bowl storyline, there's a part of that I don't think gets mentioned, and I'm not sure that it's fair to him. Because people talk about, he was running for his life, and he was sacked however many times, 7 times, 10 times, whatever the number was. It was a massive amount. He had a nice deep throw, and Jeremy James got hurt. Matt Corral, grabbed all the storyline for being hurt in that game. Jeremy James got hurt in that game, in the first quarter? And they had to shuffle the entire offensive line. So you were dealing with a really good defense and your all-SEC caliber quarterback goes down in the first half. And, by the way, a guy who has a chance to be an all-SEC type offensive lineman this year went down in the first quarter of that game. And so not only did you have to bring somebody in, you had to move somebody. So you reshuffled the offensive line. That was a recipe for failure for Luke Altmaier in that game. And yet he still had some moments where you're like, ooh, it showed you